Okay, welcome everyone to our first session after the summer break. We're very happy to have you here, and our session today will be on finance in Horizon Europe. So the goal of the session will be to highlight key changes in financial rules from Horizon 2020 to Horizon Europe, to suggest ways to prepare for financial management tasks for your Horizon Europe proposals and projects, and to provide a summary of our second Best Prac EARMA meeting that happened in June. And we would also like to invite you, of course, to ask questions and exchange ideas on how to handle these tasks based on your experience and your insights. And this meeting, you probably already saw, is recorded. We will share it afterwards on our EARMA YouTube channel, so you can rewatch it there anytime. We will also share the presentations with you afterwards. So yeah, let's have a good time. The two speakers are Per Inge Andresen. I guess most of you know him. He's a senior advisor in financial and project management of European projects at the Norwegian University of Science and Technology. And he has a Master's of Science in Economics and Business Administration, and has more than 30 years of professional experience at research performing and higher education institutions. So Per Inge, we are very happy to have you. Now our second speaker is Marija Šola, that I'm sure also most of you know, who is a project manager at the University of Belgrade at the School of Electrical Engineering, where she has worked for more than 7 years. And she also works as national contact point for financial and legal matters in FP7 and Horizon 2020 programs, and has professional experience in training grant beneficiaries on one side, and practical experience in grant management and implementation of vast numbers of EU projects in research and innovation and higher education fields. So we have two experts here today, and I would love with this to give the floor to both of them so you can come back online, and I think Per Inge will start us off.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Mona. Very nice to see everyone here. Marija, would you also like to say hello first?
Hello from my side too.
Yeah, we'll both have presentations, and we'll ask you a few questions. We're very curious about what you think of certain questions, and also what you expect that you will do with certain issues. So we'll come back to that after a while. The first question will come quite soon. The other ones will be after our presentations. So I'll start sharing my screen, and we'll start with the presentation. So the topic today is financial tasks and issues in Horizon Europe, to get started with this new framework program and dealing with that, and planning ahead how to get prepared and how to be able to deal with financial issues and tasks in proposals and projects. And these are the key topics that I plan to discuss. I have to warn you that there is quite a large number of slides in this presentation. I will not spend much time on all of these slides, but some of them are for your future reference, so that you can have a look at it later on at your own time. But I decided to keep them here as part of the overall picture. So I'll do an introduction, and then try to highlight what I see as key changes in Horizon Europe on financial issues compared to Horizon 2020. And then I go from there to, okay, how do we deal with those changes when we're managing financial tasks for the proposal stage and for the subsequent stages of the project lifecycle. After that, I'll give some suggestions about how to prepare on a different time scale. What are the first things I suggest you should think about, and what can be done later and beyond that to get prepared. I'll highlight some issues that, as far as I can see, are still unclear, and then provide a list of sources that you could look to for further guidance. First, a brief introduction about myself and where I work and what our objectives are today. So I'm senior advisor at the Norwegian University of Science and Technology. I have a background in economics and business administration, but also another background from before in a totally different area. And I have more than 30 years experience working in higher education and research performing institutions. And I've been actively involved for years in both EARMA and in the Best Practice Network, which Marija will tell you more about later on. Briefly about the Norwegian University of Science and Technology. It has a broad profile covering most academic disciplines. It has three campuses, it has campuses in 3 different cities. In Norway, the largest campus is in the city of Trondheim, where I live. It has 8 faculties, 55 departments. Last year, almost 7,800 full-time equivalents, about 42,000 students. And 7,500 completed the bachelor's and master's degree for a little more than 400 doctorate degrees completed last year. Our university has participated in 248 projects in Horizon 2020 and been granted about 140 million euros, and has also a large research activity funded by national sources in Norway. And here at the bottom, you see where the strategic focus of research is for the university as a whole. Energy, health, ocean, sustainability, biotech, digital, and nanotechnology. Education, there are 370 programs of study, and our university has the main responsibility for education in technology and is the largest educational institution in engineering, teaching education and architecture. Some of the numbers have been shown already. Our university also focuses a lot on innovation, and here are some numbers on that. We have, as it shows you here, almost 1,800 ideas received, 140 spin-offs, about 630 patent applications, and 135 license agreements. Now, the objectives today are to highlight what are the key changes from Horizon 2020 to Horizon Europe on financial topics, which means that we will assume today that you are already familiar with Horizon 2020. But that's one of the questions we'll ask you. We will provide suggestions on how to manage your proposals and projects to take care of and deal with those changes, and provide suggestions of where to look for further information. But we also want today to hear from you. First of all, of course, we'd be happy to, we invite you to ask questions, but also to exchange ideas and insights based on your own experience. So this is not about just Marija and me talking, but it's also about inviting you to be active in this event. So now, Johanna, if you could then present our first question, and we ask everybody to answer with just one option.
Yeah, I've shared the poll, so. Can you see it, Per Inge, actually?
Yes, I can see it. So if everybody now could give their answer.
Okay, 88% have already voted. That's good, I think.
Yeah, that's very good. And I think we have a winner in this election.
It's being close.
Yeah. So the numbers I see is that 97% of you who have replied have previous experience with Horizon 2020. So that's impressive. And we will take that into account when we go on with the remainder of the presentation. So moving on, I'll just hide the whole window from my screen. What are the key news in Horizon Europe from a financial point of view? We have the Model Grant Agreement, which has been called the Corporate Model Grant Agreement by the Commission. I'll say a couple of words about that, what that means. There's changes in terminology. There are significant changes regarding personnel costs, also regarding internally invoiced goods and services and contributions from third parties. We have things to say about the budget tables and not so much to say about the financial statement. A little bit about how entities might participate in Horizon Europe projects, and a few words about audits. So going on to the Corporate Model Grant Agreement. The reason why the Commission uses this term, the name Corporate Model Grant Agreement, has to do with the idea of having one base on foundation for many EU programs, and then add modules that are specific to individual programs. In stakeholder events, information events that the Commission has held, they have demonstrated this graphically. I have not included that here. But the basic idea is that you have a foundation that's common to many programs, and you build into that modules that are specific. Part of the reason why is that there is an ambition on the EU side to obtain more synergies between programs, so that they don't just operate on their own, all these different EU programs, but they try to extract more synergies across them. What it may mean for us is that it perhaps may make it easier to navigate between your projects that are funded by different programs. Hopefully, that perhaps remains to be seen. There are changes in terminology. And from the financial point of view, there are financial terms that have new names. So in the budget table and in the financial report, what used to be called other direct costs is now called purchase costs. What used to be called other goods and services is now called other goods, works, and services. The word receipts, which means income, does not exist anymore in the Corporate Model Grant Agreement, and it's not even mentioned in the pre-draft or the Annotated Model Grant Agreement. What you will find there is the word revenue. Additional remuneration does not exist now as a term. The new term is supplementary payments. Going on to personnel costs. So we're done with the grant agreement for now, and we've discussed some key changes in terminology. With personnel costs, one key change is that we used to report by hourly rates. That's not going to happen anymore. From now on, the Commission wants us to report on a daily cost per day, basically. And so they decided that 1 year consists of 215 days, regardless of how many working days there is in your organization. So when you calculate the daily rate, you take the total annual cost for personnel costs for a given person and divide it by 215. That's your daily rate. no matter what the actual number of working days are in your organization, your daily rate is 215. I'm sorry, is the total cost divided by 215. And then you may report personnel costs per day up to 215 days. Because when you get that far, you reported costs for all the costs for one person year. So you can never report more than the cost corresponding to 215 days, since your daily rate is based on that number. Another thing is that the requirement in Horizon 2020 to calculate personnel costs based on the costs from the last closed financial year, that doesn't apply anymore. So in Horizon Europe, you take the costs per calendar year. And if you have a reporting period which ends in somewhere in the middle of the year and not at the end of December at any given year, what you're supposed to do, and this is has been presented in two slightly different ways by the Commission. The way I'm showing you it here is from a stakeholder event which was held on the 9th of October last year by the Commission. And here they said that, okay, if you have a reporting period that ends somewhere in the middle of the year, you take the daily rate for those months in that the last months after January of that year are the personnel costs since January divided by 215 divided by 12 times the number of months since January in that year. So if it's the end of March, which is the end of the reporting period, you take the personnel cost for January, February, March, and divide that by 215 divided by 12 times 3 months. That's one way it was presented in this stakeholder event. If you look at the Annotated Model Grant Agreement, it's presented in a slightly different way. Parental leave is now one particular kind of leave which you may deduct from those 215 days. So then you will end up with a lower number of days that you divide the personnel cost by. So, but of course, in some countries, costs for parental leave may be reimbursed by public funds. So then also perhaps the personnel costs that you use in that calculation would be lower. But anyway, the number of days that you divide by in that case is 215 minus the number of days of parental leave. But that's the only kind of leave that you are allowed to deduct from the 215 days. Any other kind of leave cannot be deducted. And this is according to the pre-draft Annotated Model Grant Agreement, page 37. If you have a different number of working days in a year than 215, you can, since you have calculated the daily rate based on that number, because the Commission tells you to do so, you can never report more than 215 days. But of course, if that number of working days is lower, you should report actual days. Then this pre-draft Annotated Model Grant Agreement gives us an example about how to calculate the daily rate when you have a reporting period that starts and ends not exactly at the end of a calendar year. So this example, it's a little bit strange because it gives you a reporting period of 19 months, which I personally have never seen. But anyway, it starts on the 1st of September in 2021 and then ends at the 31st of March in 2023. So that's 19 months. And then the example shows you how to calculate the daily rate for the last months of 2021, for all of 2022, and then for the 3 months in 2023. So what you do is take the annual cost and divide it by 215. And then multiply that by the number of months. Well, of course, what you do is the number of days is 215 divided by 12 and multiplied by the number of months. So I'm not going to repeat all the numbers here. I'm just trying to present the calculation that is given in the Annotated Model Grant Agreement in a different format. But the idea is that you have the annual costs divided by 215 to get a daily rate. And then the number of days is 215 divided by 12, which is the number of days in 1 month, multiplied by the number of months. On the next slide, I'll show you one thing that to me seems that perhaps at first sight it's a contradiction. Because in the text explaining this example, it says about the last 3 months in 2023, from January to March, and you do that report after the end of March, right? And you don't know the actual personnel costs for all year for 2023 when you produce that report. So it says, and I'm quoting it, at the time of reporting, it is foreseen that the total cost for Mr. Y in 2023 would be 31,500 euros after an increase in social contributions for the year. So that's different from the explanation that I showed you a few slides ago, which said, take the cost for the months since January. Here it starts with the foreseen cost for the whole year. There is another quote from the Annotated Model Grant Agreement after this, which says, because the idea is that you're supposed to report actual personnel costs, and it says, the actual personnel cost of the person incurred over those months would be the cost recorded in your statutory accounts. But of course, after when you do a report in April for the period ending in March, the cost for the whole year won't be recorded in your statutory accounts. So that seems at first sight like a contradiction. Foresee means to know about something before it happens, quoting the Cambridge Dictionary. So when reporting for a period that ends in March, the costs for the whole year are not recorded. Perhaps this could be reconciled by interpreting this as meaning that when you report the costs for the last year, 2023, are foreseen to be recorded. But this is something that I think would be useful to get clarification on from the Commission. Another issue with personnel costs is, okay, so the wording is actual personnel costs means cost recorded in the statutory accounts. There are certain kinds of remuneration, i.e. payment to employees in certain countries or in certain organizations, which is generated or earned by the employee over longer periods than a given month. And here the wording says that it will be taken into account for the calculation of the daily rate only when it is recorded in the statutory accounts. And then I give two examples which would lead to, which would have to be handled in two different ways. One is in many European countries, there is a 13th salary, and that can be dealt with in two different ways. Either it's recorded pro rata every month, pro rata to the salary for that month, and it's recorded as a debt to the employee every month. In that case, it is recorded in the accounts, and you can include it in the calculation of the daily rate. The daily rate for that month. But in other cases, other places, this 13th salary is not recorded in the account before it's paid. In that case, you can only include it in the calculation of the daily rate of a reporting period if that reporting period ends before, when that payment is being made and recorded, or after that. So it mentions in the Annotated Model Grant Agreement that this could typically, for instance, happen in July, that it's being paid in July. If you have a reporting period which ends in March, you cannot include it, even if the employee is entitled to that later on. You have to wait to report it until after July and in the next reporting period, according to these guidelines. So it depends on the accounting practice for this 13th salary in your organization. I have another issue which is from my own country. Our vacation pay is earned and booked in our accounts every month. Then it's being paid in June. But then in June, the payment of salary is fixed for everybody who's on a fixed salary, steady, and not a salary which depends month by month on how many hours you work that month. But like most of us working at universities, for instance, we have the same salary every month anyway. But what happens in June is that, okay, then our vacation pay that from the previous 12 months is being paid to us, but it's assumed that we take our vacation in that same month. So the salary for that month is deducted in the accounts, not to us, but in the accounts. And then the net personnel cost in June is close to zero. I'll show you here in this chart. So if the dark blue columns is the personnel costs, which in June are on average are close to zero. And then in all the other months, they would be a lot higher. But then if we assume that a person does not take his or her vacation in June, and most people don't, but they take their vacation later, the number of working days would not follow the same pattern as personnel costs, and you will have a gap. And to us, that's something we have to figure out, how to deal with that when we calculate these daily rates. I'm not going into more detail to that, but I'm just show you that that's also an issue. Going on, there is, I mentioned that the word additional remuneration, which existed in Horizon 2020, does not exist in Horizon Europe. A new term exists there, it's called supplementary payments. And there are two versions of that. One is called option A for programs with standard rules for supplementary payments. And the other is option B for programs with project-based supplementary payments. I know that this is a topic of big interest in some European countries, and as far as I know, tends to be more of an issue in the southern and eastern parts of Europe. In my country and for my university, we have not considered this as relevant for the way we operate. But I'll try to present something about this in case this is of interest to some of you here. So the standard rule-based supplementary payments, i.e. not project-based, but standard rule-based. It may consist of variable components that are added to the salary, for instance, bonuses. And it may include payments on the basis of supplementary contracts, irrespective of the nature of these contracts. They may be eligible if on certain conditions. If it's part of the usual remuneration practice and it's being paid in a consistent manner, whatever the same kind of work or expertise is required, And the criteria used to calculate these supplementary payments are objective and generally applied, regardless of the source of funding. So you can't have, if you have a solution that sort of depends on who's paying you, that would not be acceptable. And then it would not be eligible. Then project-based supplementary payments. As far as I know, this is the version that is of most interest in certain countries in Europe. It is for personnel that receive supplementary payments when they work in projects. So they have a base salary, and then whenever they work in projects, they get an additional salary. And there are a number of preconditions for these costs to be eligible. They have to correspond to actual remuneration paid. They have to be paid during the reporting period, and they cannot be higher than what's called the national projects reference. I guess say a little bit more about that afterwards. The amount must be based on objective criteria, and it must be the usual practice for the organization to pay these supplementary payments for working in national schemes. So if this is the way you operate in national schemes and all the other conditions have been fulfilled, then it may be eligible. What a national project? That's broadly defined as any project funded by any kind of national funding, public or private. And it may also include EU funds that are managed by the member states, like, for instance, regional funds. This national project reference, there are a bunch of rules about how to determine what is your national projects reference. Either if there is are regulatory requirements, which may be legislation or collective labor agreements, or if you have an internal written remuneration rule in your organization. And then there are a lot of sentences about, okay, these rules, if they define a range, you would look at what the person received in the previous calendar year. And if the rules define a level of remuneration per staff category, you just find the appropriate staff category. If the remuneration depends on what kind of national projects, then you have to find the right type of project, and you have to find the type of project that looks most like the one, the Horizon Europe project that we're talking about. And if the remuneration changes during the current year, you would have to go with the amount that was applicable for the largest part of the year. So there are lots of checkpoints here regarding whatever rules you have for the national project reference that you'll have to look at. Also, there's wording about, okay, if you don't have any regulatory requirements, right? Here it says regulatory requirements, legislation or collective labor agreements. So if you don't have that, and you don't have written internal remuneration rules, what can you do then? Are you then lost, or is there still hope? And here it says that there is still hope. If you don't have any of these written rules of any kind, but there is a usual practice to pay bonuses for work in national projects, and you need to be able to prove that. Then you could calculate still a national project daily rate as the average of what the person received in the previous calendar year. And I'll show you the formula, because you have to deduct the remuneration paid for EU projects, and also in the calculation, and you also need to deduct the number of days worked in these EU projects. But this is something that you could look at later on. Okay, then, so that was quite a bit about personnel costs, and also about this issue of project-based supplementary payments. Now the issue of documenting how much work you've done on the project, the effort, which used to be hours in Horizon 2020. Now it's the number of days that you're supposed to report. And so you don't need timesheets. And the Commission doesn't necessarily recommend timesheets anymore either. But they are accepted. I mean, if you do have timesheets and you want to keep doing using timesheets, that's okay, but you have to convert hours to days. What you can use instead is a monthly declaration on the number of days worked on the project. And so each organization needs to decide, if we use timesheets today, are we going to continue using that? And use them for all projects? Or are we going to use timesheets for Horizon 2020 and monthly declarations for Horizon Europe? Or what are we going to do? So that's up to each organization to decide. The Commission actually has published a template for this monthly declaration of the number of days worked in the project. And I included a screenshot of that template in this presentation here. So basically it contains number of days per month working on the project. And it has a column for which work packages, but it doesn't give you any room to have a breakdown of days per work package. So it's just, you just mention work packages, but you don't say, okay, it's one month for that work package and 0.5 for that work package. Not according to this template, the way it looks here. Okay, so that was quite a bit about personnel costs and the time worked on project.
Can I interrupt you a little bit?
Yeah.
Because so far we have 4 questions and all of them are about personnel costs. Do you want to answer on it right now or at the end of the presentation?
Okay, maybe if we could wait, because there is a little bit more about personnel costs later on.
Okay.
If that's okay with everyone.
Thank you.
If we do still have the questions on record, and we can see if any of those questions are answered in a later slide, perhaps, if that's okay.
Okay, great, thank you.
So the next issue, internal invoice goods and services. That's another area where there is change. First of all, the Commission says that it will be willing to accept usual accounting practice to a greater extent than what it has in the past. One clear and very concrete change is that now internal invoice goods and services are supposed to include indirect costs. And this cost category, there will be no indirect cost added to cost in that category, in the budget table or in the financial statement. So if you have 10,000 euros in indirect in internal invoice goods and services, you will not have 25% cost, 25% on top of that for indirect costs. You're expected to have included your own actual indirect costs, which may be totally different from the 25%, and include your own indirect costs in the calculation of the internal invoice goods and services, which many places is the way it's done anyway, right? So for I expect that for many beneficiaries, this will be a simplification, make life a little bit easier. And if you don't include indirect costs now in your calculation of internal invoice goods and services, if you want to change that, you have to do it across the board, not just when you use these services in Horizon Europe project. Then you have to use the new internal invoice rate, regardless of who's paying. So that's important to keep in mind. And another rule is that when you report internal invoice goods and services in an Horizon Europe project, these cannot be higher than what they are in other projects, or when they're being funded by somebody else. Another topic that I briefly mentioned, receipts, it's not a word anymore. Now it's called revenue. But there are also new columns related to that in the budget table. I'll get back to that later on. Revenue, I could have added more detail on this, but I haven't here. Revenue is, as I said, it's only relevant for for-profit entities. So non-profit entities, they don't need to report any revenue at all. But if somebody is a consortium, has revenue, that may affect the consortium as a whole. So this is why when you have consortium agreements, you still need to have rules within a consortium of how to deal with that scenario where some for-profit entity has revenue, which may lead to a reduction in the EU funding for the consortium. One point is that in-kind contributions provided free of charge by third parties. I get more back to this later on. Question is whether that is supposed to be counted as revenue by for-profit entities. So that's one question. Contributions by third parties. There are quite a few slides about this, but I'm not going to do them in detail. But the key point is that it may be confusing when one tries to read the documents for Horizon Europe, having the terminology from Horizon 2020 in mind, because here terminology has changed and definitions have changed and rules have changed. In Horizon Europe, in-kind contribution means for free. This is a highlight of the issues that I've dealt within the next slides, so I'll just skip that for now. In Horizon 2020, you used to have the term in-kind contributions by third parties against payment or free of charge. And there was also a question in the budget table and the financial statement about was it used on the beneficiary's premises or not, because that had implications for the calculation of indirect costs. In Horizon Europe, first of all, the definition of the term has been a lot narrower now. And the other is that you don't have this distinction between used on the beneficiary's premises or not, the way you had in Horizon 2020. So briefly, in the Model Grant Agreement for Horizon 2020, just as a reminder, you had two articles, one for use of in-kind contributions provided by parties against payment, or one free of charge. And then in the budget table, you had a column for additional information for the calculation of indirect costs, whether you had in-kind contributions not used on the premises of the beneficiary, because that would be deducted from the calculation of indirect costs. In Horizon Europe, in-kind contributions is now limited to meaning when it's provided free of charge. In-kind contribution against payment doesn't exist anymore. And this is because of the financial regulation, which are the financial rules for all of the EU budget, basically, that were published in 2018. They define in-kind contribution as non-financial resources made available free of charge by third parties to a beneficiary. So this is just bringing the rules for Horizon Europe in line with the financial regulation. And the implication of that is that the definition of this term has been a lot more limited in what it contains. It must be for free. That doesn't mean that if you have something that was defined as in-kind contribution by third party against payment in Horizon 2020, that it may not be funded. It may, but you don't call it that. You call it something else. So where do we find them now? Well, there isn't a whole article about income contributions here anymore, but there is some text about income contributions in 2 articles. There's some text in Article 6.1 about general criteria for eligibility of costs. And there is some text about it in Article 9.2. In the budget table, you don't have this column anymore for additional information about use of premises or not. So the terminology here is that income contribution by third parties means non-financial resources made available for free. You have seconded persons. If personnel is made available against payment, then it's under the personnel category seconded persons. I think I will, one point here about indirect costs. You're supposed to include only the direct costs for the third party, and you will get 25% for indirect costs on top of that. So I think I will skip this. This is a slide about how to include it in the budget. So if it's personnel that are being seconded against payment, you put that under seconded persons. And if there are other things that are provided by a third party and you pay for it, you put it in the same budget category as if you were to just buy it, basically. So if it's other goods, works, and services that's provided by a third party and you pay for it, you just use that cost category in the budget. If it's in, I've added a slide here because, and this is about budgeting in-kind contributions. And in-kind means for free, right? In Horizon Europe. I'll show you later on in the budget window in the EU portal for a proposal. I'll show you, you can click on a question mark and get a pop-up window. And I did that for a proposal today, actually. And it says that for in-kind contributions, not applicable for Horizon Europe, which surprises me, because if you look at the pre-draft of the Annotated Model Grant Agreement, it says in-kind contributions for free are only for Horizon Europe. So to me, that looks like the exact opposite. So I think this is something that we should also be clarified by the Commission. It might mean, if you want to sort of bridge the gap between these 2 sources, say that, okay, it's eligible, but you don't need to put it in the budget, right? But again, it would be useful if the Commission could clarify this, in my mind. Reporting is the same as for budgeting, basically, that if it's against payment, non-personnel, you just put it in the same category as cost category as if you were to buy it. If it's personnel, it's seconded persons and so on. If you paid for it. And if it is income contribution free of charge, then there is a separate category for that. Time is running. About budgeting, I've included screenshots of budget tables here, which you can look at later on. I'll just say one quick word about it, and then about terminology, cost categories, and personnel categories. You have one budget table in the corporate model grant agreement, but a lot of those columns are only applicable for certain types of actions or certain calls. So they will not be applicable to whatever project you are involved in. But in the proposal stage, the budget table may be quite different from in the grant agreement. So just to be aware of that. This is a screenshot from the corporate model grant agreement. And you see in the middle here, a lot of columns that are only applicable to certain kinds of actions. If you look more closely at the same table, you see here that under personnel, you have 4 categories of personnel costs. Employees and seconded and so on. But you don't in the proposal stage. And then you have all these that are only applicable to certain calls. But you might ask, are we really talking about a corporate budget table or not? Because as we know, the ERC budget table used to be quite different, and it still is. This is the proposal budget table for research and innovation or innovation action call. And here, if you click on the question mark, which I have highlighted with a red arrow here, then you will get a pop-up window, which looks like this, and it's even longer. So I just included part of this budget window. So this is one source that I suggest you use. And as far as I can see, the contents of this window is quite a bit more detailed now than it was before the summer or earlier calls this year. And this says the same thing that at the top here, that please note that only the budget categories that apply will be visible for your topic. As we know, the ERC budget table was quite different in Horizon 2020, and it still is. It has its own personnel categories. And for the Marie Skłodowska career actions, what we should notice is that there are 2 new categories of allowances for the researcher: long-term leave allowance and special needs allowance. I don't think I would spend more time on them now, but you should be aware of them. And of course, these are not allowances that you budget in a proposal. You don't produce a budget in a proposal anyway. These are some things something that you ask for when the need arises, basically. About budgeting, there are changes in terminology, which some of them I've mentioned already. There are new cost categories and categories that have disappeared, and there are changes in category calculation rules. I mentioned here more about changes in terminology and summarized some of it here. Some of them I've mentioned already about the cost categories. The first 3 lines here. There's also 2 more lines about entities that are not beneficiaries but are involved in the consortium in a different way. A linked third party is now an affiliated entity. An international partner is now associated partner. So you can look at this later on at your own time. And then here are a lot of cost categories that are unique to just some calls. And another thing that's new in the proposal template budgets is that there are a lot of new columns about income. So also be aware of those. You have revenues, income generated by the action. You have financial contributions by other sources, and you have your own resources, which is sort of the funding side of the whole budget. Has new columns now that we didn't have before. As I mentioned, in personnel, we do have categories. When you look at the proposal budget, you don't see those. But I noticed in a call, I mentioned this later on, it's useful to collect this information in the proposal stage anyway. One thing to note is that if you have a case of an SME owner who's not being paid a salary, they are, as I guess many of you know, entitled to a budget for personnel costs, which is based on the MSCA unit cost, the same as for which is now postdoctoral fellowships in Horizon Europe. But this same partner might also have actual costs in addition to the unit cost, just so you're aware of that. This is a summary of how, in what way may an entity be involved in a consortium. Different ways to participate in the Horizon Europe projects. You may be a beneficiary, you may be an affiliated entity, which is a new name for linked third party. If you have any questions about that, please ask a question. Otherwise, I'll assume that you know what this is. Associated partners are partners that don't receive EU funding, basically. But they're still working on tasks in the project. And then you have third parties contributing to the project, contribution by third party, and then you have subcontractors. And you have third parties receiving financial support. So be aware of what these different categories mean and whether, to what extent they need to be mentioned in the budget or in the proposal. Now the last slide under this section about changes is about audits and specifically about the threshold for certificate of financial statements, which is now at a higher amount. That's one change. It's now 430,000 euros, not 325. But the other change is that it now refers to the total requested EU contribution, including the indirect costs. So that's also another change. Okay, time is running. I'll have to do some of these slides quickly so that we have time for questions. So far we talked about what's new in Horizon Europe. Now, how to deal with those changes. So I'll link this to the project life cycle with the stages: the proposal stage, grant preparation stage, this project start, the implementation stage, and the end of the project. In the proposal stage, you have budgeting. Some or most of the items have been mentioned already under the previous section about changes. So you need to take care of the fact that they now are talking about corporate daily rates and project-based remuneration also are changes. But of course, I would argue that in a proposal stage, you normally estimate personnel costs on the basis of person months. So the change from hours to days should not really have much implication for budgeting proposals anyway. We talked about income contribution by third parties and internal invoice and services, so I won't spend time on that now. Equipment costs, normally we're talking about depreciation, but there is an option for assets under construction, i.e. prototypes, or for instance prototypes, that you should keep an eye on. So for personnel costs, I'll skip this briefly, but I would say one thing just to highlight it. For budgeting for proposal, I would argue that we're still talking person months. We never talked hours and we won't talk days. But the question that every organization should ask itself is, are we going to use the same tools for that we used before, or are we going to have separate internal Excel tools for Horizon 2020 and for Horizon Europe? So these issues, since time is running, I will basically not go into them. Most of these things have been mentioned already. about daily rates, but I'm saying here, we're talking person months in proposal stage anyway. Project-based remuneration, though, for those who that is relevant, you have to look into it. As I mentioned here, or I also briefly mentioned before, if you have, when you are a beneficiary, you should, if you are an SME, you should look into this question about SME owners not receiving a salary and the unit cost rate for marine school MSCA, marine school industrial reactions. And you should use a consistent methodology to include a realistic estimate of salary increase. Personnel categories, I mentioned these before, but as I mentioned here, it's useful if you collect information about which of these personnel categories. When you are a coordinator and you collect data from the partners about their personnel costs, it's useful if you also collect data from the partners about which personnel categories apply to them. Because like it said here in the EIC Pathfinder open call earlier this year, it said that during the grant preparation stage, you need to separate the cost for each of these categories. And you don't have much time in the grant preparation stage. So to start collecting that information then, so it's useful to collect the information in the proposal stage. This is something that I suggest you could read later on. For SME owners, you should probably double check the rate for each country. That's relevant. Internal invoice goods and services. The question that you should ask yourself if you have internal invoice goods and services is, how do you keep track of the differences in rules between Horizon 2020 and Horizon Europe? For instance, the fact about indirect costs. How are we going to manage that when you have some projects in each program? Lump sum funding is nothing new, but I included 3 slides about it here because the Commission plans to expand the use of lump sum funding. But I'll just skip the slides for now. One thing that each organization should decide is the question about timesheets for Horizon Europe. Are we going to use them for Horizon Europe and not for Horizon 2020? Are we going to use it for all projects, or are we not going to use it at all? Financial statements. The question that each organization should ask itself is, are we going to have produce new internal tools to produce the data for the financial statements? Like you have to work on the data that you take out of your accounting system and your HR system, and then process them before you can input them into the financial statement in the EU portal. And my question is, are we going to produce new tools for Horizon Europe, or what are you going to do? Then in terms of planning for the future, the thing is that many of us, we have a mixed project portfolio, different funders, different programs, and so on. And in terms of the EU framework program, those of us who already have projects in the previous framework program, illustrated in a very simplified way, we will have a gradual transition from old to new project, but we will have years with an overlap of 2 programs where we have to live with the rules for 2 different programs in our project portfolio. And that's what we have to keep in mind. So here is a suggestion of how to think about what should we do first and what can we do next year and what can we do later. in terms of preparing to deal with the financial task. So briefly, in the short term, I would just look for the updates from the Commission of the rules in the sources that I provide later on, and start preparing budget tools. But decide what kind of tools you think you need. Then you could start for next year when you get the first projects. Then you need to be ready to deal with the implementation stage issues of projects that are starting to run in your organization. Like, for instance, are you going to have timesheets or not? And then later on, then you can, the financial reporting tools, perhaps you could leave for later, because it's going to take a while before you need to produce a first financial statement. And the question is, the Commission wants a greater degree of harmonization across programs. The question is, how much would that actually happen? And to what extent would we perceive this as a harmonization? I've just tried to, in a simple way, try to illustrate here the questions you could ask yourself when you're going to decide what kind of budget tools should we develop internally, like Excel tools. So simplified in terms of how many proposals do you expect that the organization would submit, but also what variety of work programs would you target with your proposals. And if you're going to have a lot of proposals and for very many different work programs, it would probably make sense to either have one very complex budget tool or have actually one budget tool for each of those work programs. I have two slides here about things that so far seem to be unclear. Just mention briefly one by one. One is this thing about personnel costs that I mentioned. When you have the reporting period that ends in the middle of the year somewhere, are you going to use, like it said in the Annotated Model Grant Agreement, an estimated cost for the whole of that last year before it's being recorded in the accounts? Or do you have to do something else? But this is what was said in the example in the Annotated Model Grant Agreement pre-draft. One question about internal invoice goods and services is, will we need to document the total number of units that are invoiced internally of whatever it is, right? For revenue, there's a question about whether income contributions free of, as reported as eligible costs have to be declared, sorry, should be free of charge, I guess, should be declared as revenue. Then personnel costs, personnel provided by, contributed by third parties, seconded persons. The question is, the Annotated Model Grant Agreement says that a secondment normally requires the seconded person to work at the beneficiary's premises, although in specific cases it may be agreed otherwise in the secondment agreement. And this is related to indirect costs, because seconded persons are supposed to be reported as direct costs, and then you get 25% added on top of that for indirect costs. Regardless of where they work, basically. Whereas in Horizon 2020, if they were not working on the premises, then that would be different. So that's something that would be useful to clarify. And the other is other in non-personal, non-financial contributions to third party. How to deal with that in terms of indirect costs. Finally, I provided here a list of where to look for answers, basically, to your questions and guidance. The Annotated Model Grant Agreement, if you look at it, one thing that it's important to be aware of is that this is only a partial document and we should expect updates. So look for updates on the Annotated Model Grant Agreement. Now it only deals with Articles 1 to 20 plus Annex 5. And for reference, for the previous framework program, there were 21 versions of the Annotated Model Grant Agreement published. Also look at the proposal template, and for each new call, make sure you look at the proposal template for that call, because there may be changes. In the budget window in the proposal, for a proposal in the EU portal, like I showed you, and with the question mark, there is a pop-up window. We now also look for that, because you may find information there that you don't find anywhere else, basically. Then also there may be, I've seen already this year that when you participate in a proposal, that suddenly you get an email with some update about that call that may be relevant for you. The Horizon Europe online manual, I hope that it will be a dynamic searchable tool in the EU portal. At the moment, it's just a PDF document. Also look for frequently asked questions that are answered and published by the Commission in the portal. Look in the corporate model grant agreement and also in the work program specific grant agreement. There will be an Annex 4, which is the model for the CFS, the financial statement, that's one thing, but there's also, I hope, going to be available at some time the CFS template and the document which includes the guidance on what the auditor should do and check and then report on when you have a certificate on a financial statement. So that may also give clues about that are useful to our beneficiary, which is reporting and participating in the project. And then there are a few EU help desks. I've just included the link to the webpage where you can select the help desk and so on. So I'll wrap it up there. This is just a brief summary that we'll have to live with a mix of funding sources for now and figure out how to live with that mixed and changing world where we have to expect that more will be published by the Commission in terms of guidelines in the time to come. Sorry, I went over time. And I'll leave the word to Marija now.
Thank you very much, Per Inge. I tried to share my screen. Good afternoon from my side again. As host introduced me, my name is Marija Šola Spasić, and I will give you a brief overview and sum what happens during our previous meeting in June 2021. From the beginning, for those who don't know what BestPrac is, BestPrac is a network established in origins from cost target network, implementing in period 2014-2019. And as I can see from the chat, some people from this network are today with us, and I'm very happy to see it. What the aim of this network is improving administrative, financial, and legal procedure of research project European funding, how we done on it, and how we still doing with it. We are divided in 3 working groups. First working group, administration, cover overall management and of external funding projects. Second working group is about finance, dealing with the financial aspect of preparing and running cross-European project. My colleague Per Inge and I, we are actively involved in this working group. And VG3, dealing with legal, keep track, keep eye on legal framework and what are the legal changes in the European rules. Because we come from VG2, I just want to mention some our outputs, especially last on this slide. What we are a pan-European network of research administrators. Practically what it means, we have our own mailing lists with more about 129 members from 28 countries. And we are real-time practical support in day-to-day life of each of us. Usually we get, for example, if you send questions on our mailing list, you will get at least 3 answers in a very short time, of course, except if it is during the summer or other breaking seasons. Except answering on the questions and providing support to each other, we are sharing information and exchanging experience about financial issue from different funding programs. If you are interested for finance, please let me know. It is enough to send me an email and I can add you in on our mailing list. As I mentioned before, this project was finished, the cost as a program stopped finance of us. But after that period, until now, we have more than 600 people from 41 countries, which are involved in our network. We stay trying to give our best to capacity building and the professional development of research management and administration as profession. We have a lot of development learning material. We hard work as volunteers in this network, and our experience is that people are willing to share their knowledge and experience, and we dedicated to increasing the visibility EARMA. Of course, if you want to get more information about this network, you can follow us on social media or join us on different group for the further discussion. What to say about previous joint meeting EARMA and BESPRAC? It was a great and comprehensive event with a lot of participants, with a lot of great speakers. During this 2 days event, we had 4 financial topics and additional 5 subtopics. How to summarize everything? During this event, we somehow find that in this more or less a dark period with open calls under the new EU programs, Horizon Europe, but without a Untitled Model Grant Agreement or any other similar documents, the crucial question was how to avoid pitfall when budgeting for Horizon Europe. This was the key question during this meeting. We had a lot of presentation trying to answer on this question. But at the end, we find that the exchange experience generated during the budgeting and project implementation in previous EU programs like FP7, Horizon 2020, is the only way to overcome this obstacle and avoid costly pitfalls. We discussed that is good things the discussion with a practitioner from different countries before the publishing this Annotated Model Grant Agreement during the summer. European Commission shows moving forward of micro management because they take in consideration a lot of comments and suggestions from practitioner. What we find that it's very important to provide the feedback to European Commission about our audit process. Why? Because the Commission trying to set up a new controlling mechanism, and we think that the feedback from all beneficiaries are very important and crucial for future. One of our colleagues mentioned simplification as a very popular words using at the end of Horizon program and during an announcement of the new one by commissioners. But we agree that simplification means simplification for European Commission, but normally it means more work for us. And we should be aware of it. And it was one of the key points at the end of discussion. And what we can suggest that because of the overlapping ongoing Horizon 2020 project, and I saw in the chat that some of your questions came from that position, we are going to suggest you to have some kind of a transitional period until 2026, trying to find a mechanism to implement the project in parallel, using both rules of participation for Horizon 2020 and Horizon Europe. We are aware that it is not easy, but we hope that we will help each other to go with it. What's next? The position of finance in the future of development of research management and administration as profession. We will trying to find a mechanism to enable border exchange experience, sharing, and developing best practice among the financial experts to navigate the different finding programs, which is, as you can see, it's very important because first of your questions today came from the differences and comparison Erasmus, Horizon 2020, Horizon Europe, Creative Europe, and other EU programs. What I want to say as one, except this event, which are a kind of a follow-up after our previous meeting in June, you can probably, maybe some of you know that we have one ongoing project which the aim is to strengthen the network of research managers and administration from Visegrad 4 countries and the Western Balkan countries to help them to contribute to more successfully participation in Horizon Europe. This project, as you can see from the website and the social networks, have a lot of aims and a lot of activities foreseen. But what I want to mention today is that we find a place for financial as a topics in this project as well. And I hope that I will see some of you again, or all of you again, at the beginning of the next year on the webinar, which will be organized by this project and dedicated to finance. Of course, I'm staying in your disposal for any question. But because of time running, I have to back on your question and answer and try to help my colleague to answer for everything. Per Inge, are you here?
Thanks a lot, Marija. I would suggest if we first do the remaining survey questions that we have planned, If Johanna, if you could run the survey, and I would ask everybody if you could try to answer quickly in the survey. If we agree that we leave each, maybe Johanna, I could ask you, do you have to share the questions one by one?
No, they will all come up now. If I think,
at once. Good.
I think so. Let's see.
Because we should agree on a time limit for this part, I think.
Yeah, you can see all at once, I guess.
Yeah. Could we ask everybody to, because there are now 5 questions, if we could ask everybody to reply in 1 minute to those 5 questions?
Yeah.
I think that 1 minute is enough. It's not so hard questions.
Okay, everyone, so feel free to start now.
So make sure that you check all the questions, all 5, and answer. Okay, I think we spent the minute. There are still answers popping up.
Yeah, we can see the results now.
Yeah. Okay, but I think maybe we'll leave it open and then start answering questions.
I think because now, yeah, I think now it's not possible anymore to collect.
Okay, so
yeah.
Close it there, and maybe we could briefly review the answers. Can you share them so that everybody see the answers? Because I don't know if I see the same window as the other participants. You are not.
Yeah, everyone is seeing them now.
Okay, so then we can also see that for question number 1 about timesheets, it seems that a majority will use timesheets for all EU projects. That's 39%, 23% will use them or for EU and national projects. And actually 20% have full-time time recording. I'm surprised. That's a higher percentage than what I would expect. And then 14% use them only for, will plan to use them only for Horizon 2020 projects. And then here, the next question is, do you expect that you will change time recording system? And 39% say that they will continue as before. 20% say that they will continue, they haven't decided yet. And 17% say that they will make a change specifically for Horizon Europe. And then the question about the expectation will budget and report cost for internally invoiced goods and services. And 46% say yes, 20% no, and 33% don't know, okay? But that's almost half who expect that internally invoiced goods and services is relevant for them. That's interesting to know. Supplementary payments. Do you consider that as relevant and potentially eligible? And here the majority don't know, and that's 39%, whereas 32% say no, not for any option. 13% say yes, according to the standard rules, which is not project-based. 5% say yes according to project-based, and 11% say yes for both options. So if we add up those 3 options, either standard-based or project-based or both, the sum that use any kind of supplementary payment or expect to do so would be almost 30%, right? Just in doing it but without Excel or without a calculator. And then the last question about, do you expect that your organization will set up special internal rules for harmonization or of internal procedures for Horizon 2020 and other EU and other EU projects, Horizon Europe projects. And 42% say yes, they will harmonize or do things to harmonize how to manage these different programs. 42% say yes. 25% say no, and 33% don't know yet. Well, thanks a lot for your answers. And we'll share this, right, Johanna, after the event, so that everybody can see this information. I think it's interesting for everybody to know what the picture looks like. Yeah, sure, I can share the survey results as well. And I really appreciate it also that you shared this information with us, all of you. If you look at the questions, the one that has the most votes is about, okay, I'll read it. In our university, it's from Ruben Philippe. In our university, we work less than 215 days on a yearly basis, say 210. And a person X works full time on the project, and are we making a loss on his or her personal costs? Since we're only allowed to multiply the daily rate by 210 days. We also record hours, so we have to use the conversion rule. May we say 1,580 hours, or our workable hours divided by 215 equals 7.35 hours. I would, as far as I can see, I would say the answer is yes. So because there is something in the Annotated Model Grant Agreement that you could look at about this on page 120. So it's under the Article 20 about record keeping. And I also, I think I remember having read something else about this 90% rule that you may remember from Horizon 2020. So your your workable hours or productive hours, the productive hours, that is, as far as I can see, I can't give you a written guarantee, but as far as I can see, if your annual productive hours is 1,580, and that probably is within 90% of what it would be on an 8-hour day basis, then you could divide that number by 215, and 7.35 would be your conversion factor from hours to days. Marija, do you agree?
Yes, it's a look like one of the possibility from transferring from hours to days. I can share with you, if you want, I can share with you this possibility. It's one of the presentation from European Commission, and based on it, yes, I agree that, as Per Inge said, I cannot be 100% sure, but if you see what they told us about this situation, yeah, I think that it's okay.
Yeah.
Calculation is right, yeah.
Yeah, so we are agreed that we believe the answer is yes. So you don't divide by your hours, number of hours by 8, but by 7.35 to get the number of, to convert from hours to days. So that's one question. And the next one is from Katrin Winders. I apologize if I don't pronounce the name correctly. When I see the monthly declaration template, can we assume no more reporting of person months per work package will be required? I would be slightly careful about just taking that for granted personally, for two reasons. One is that in previous experience with Horizon 2020, there have been many cases where project officers have asked for more information than what you're supposed to report in the templates and in the portal. And so I would like to get some additional assurance on that. because I haven't checked the model grant agreement for this issue, but in Horizon 2020, in the grant agreement there, it said that, okay, the commission may ask for more information if they think they need it after you've submitted your periodic report. So you submit your periodic report the way you're supposed to and provide all the information, and then the project officer comes back to you and say, okay, but we want more information. And they were allowed to do that. Question is, will they still be allowed to do that in Horizon Europe? I would double check that before I concluded. The other is that, as far as I can see, the Commission has been rushed for time, so they're still working on producing more guidelines. Like the Annotated Model Grant Agreement is still a pre-draft, and it only covers some of the articles in the grant agreement, not the whole grant agreement. It does include Article 20, which is the article on record keeping. So, I mean, you could hope that it would be good enough just to have that monthly declaration and use that template. Personally, I would probably not just conclude finally on that and not think about it anymore, but perhaps be prepared to have information available internally with a breakdown per work package. At least if I were to say, I would be prepared for that, but the question is, when will you have your first projects granted under Horizon Europe, and when do you need to have your own internal procedures ready? If you still have time to wait for the first project, I would probably suggest to leave that question open for now. Maria, do you have anything?
I completely agree with you. I think that I'm not sure that Commission will be satisfied just to have the one number of person months used during the whole project life, but as you say, we will see. Be careful with this. I'm not sure, and I think, as Per Inge said, that we will have several versions of Annotated Model Grant Agreement before the first reports, and it cannot be a problem. In some of them, probably will this is clarified, and as you know, each Annotated Model Grant Agreement, each version is obligatory for all ongoing projects, based on experience in Horizon 2020. But I cannot say that we can be satisfied with just the number of person months without a divide per work package. I'm not sure. Can we go forward, because we are
over time, yeah. The next question has to do with conversions of hours to days, and you need to round up. But in light of what we answered to the first question, maybe we can consider this question being handled, and we could go on. I mean, you divide by the number of productive hours in your organization when you convert from hours to days, and then you round off depending according to normal rules, either up or down to to half days. Next question is, what do you have to use? This next question is from Elena Gugliato. I apologize again if I don't pronounce it correctly. What do you have to use as an actual cost for a person working on the project for the months in the calendar year falling within the reporting period? Well, I showed you the two different ways of calculating costs for a period that ends, let's say, March. One from a stakeholder event, which said, take the cost from January to March and use that. And the other in the Annotated Model Grant Agreement is take the foreseen cost for the whole year and use that. So there are two methods that are significantly different in my mind. I would say that on a general basis, if there is a conflict between what's said in a PowerPoint presentation by a person from the Commission on the one hand, and the Annotated Model Grant Agreement, the Untitled Model Grant Agreement would take precedence from a legal point of view. And the grant agreement would take precedence over that again. I mean, because that's a legally binding contractual document. The Annotated Model Grant Agreement is not legally binding. But it's more binding than a PowerPoint presentation in a stakeholder event. But we should again look for more clarification, I think, from the Commission. If we were to use the current draft Annotated Model Grant Agreement, you should use the estimated cost for the whole year and take it from there. Marija, do you want to add something?
No.
No?
That's
okay. Then the next question is about, it starts with, it's from Javier Lopez. Hi, if I may, I break the ice with a question. Next week, there's a submission deadline for Erasmus Plus and Creative Europe calls and proposals. In both calls, the funding schemes lump sum. When drafting the budget, should we use our actual costs? Okay, it's moving now. Or should we use the standard HE Horizon Europe calculation formula based on daily rates? For lump sum projects in general, in which no financial reporting is required, which record should be kept in case of financial audit? Okay, personally, I don't work on Erasmus Plus and Creative Europe. I do know something about lump sum funding. I don't know if the lump sum funding rules for Erasmus Plus and Creative Europe are the same as for Horizon Europe. Do you know, Marija?
No, nothing additional.
No. Okay, I would suspect that since we're talking about lump sum funding, you should use your best estimate of actual costs according to your own rules. Just make sure that there are you don't include cost elements that are not eligible. Like if there are any kinds of bonuses that would not be eligible, I would keep those out. But other than that, I'm not sure if it matters if you use the 215 days or just actual costs, as long as it's based on lump sum funding. They're not supposed, if you're talking about Horizon Europe lump sum funding, they're not supposed to be financial audits in general, at all. I mean, that's one of the big arguments why that they used to sell this whole idea of lump sum funding is that you won't have financial audits. What will happen though is during the proposal evaluation that the Commission will take a critical look at the numbers, and they would also compare the numbers in the budget in the proposal with data that they have in other sources about what are the cost levels in projects that have been running and so on. So there is more of a financial check actually in the proposal stage, but no financial audit in Horizon Europe lump sum funding. Marija?
I have to add something based on my experience, because we in Serbia, we have a lot of Erasmus Plus projects. Unfortunately, the situation in Erasmus Plus is not so easy as in Horizon, because usually in Erasmus Plus, they use lump sum a lot, and unfortunately, and the unit costs as well. Unfortunately, based on my experience, the agency which are in charge for Erasmus want to see financial documentation.
Okay.
And
thanks a lot, Marija, for adding that, because as I said, I don't work on Erasmus Plus, so I had no idea.
But I think that this is a differences between the programs which should be somehow resolved in the future by Commission.
I agree completely, yeah.
Because we use the same models, lump sum, flat rate, actual costs, but have different position when we speak about the documentation and audit.
Yeah.
And please be careful with these programs, because it's not same if you ask us who deal in Horizon and Horizon Europe about lump sum. And if you ask someone who deal with Erasmus or Creative Europe and use the same model, it is completely different because this depends on agency.
Yeah. Which is exactly what we were supposed to move away from, right?
Because of that, we need help to harmonize these different funding schemes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the Commission has been talking about synergies and corporate model grant agreements and so on, but there is still a lot of work to be done, I think, in that regard.
I agree. I think that we are just on the beginning of this process.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks a lot, Marija. Next question from Staska. Nice to see you, Staska. What's the difference between the work of employees of third party working on the project? Now it moved, so I have to just update my screen here. Yeah, what's the difference between the work of employees of a third party working on the project and seconded persons from the third party? Is the difference only regarding the occasional work? I hope I don't misunderstand your question. As far as I can see off the top of my head, persons from a third party working on a project, that could also mean subcontracting, which is different, right? So as long as we're not talking about subcontracting, and then a third party and a person from a third party working project, I think would only mean seconded person. But this is just taking that off the top of my head. I think the other options would not be employees in a third party. So if we leave subcontracting aside, if we leave that aside, I think then we're left with seconded person. And seconded person, like I said in my presentation, the wording in the Annotated Model Grant Agreement is that normally that person would be working on the premises of the beneficiary, but there may be exceptions. It's still a seconded person. Marija, anything you'd like to add?
No, I don't want to add anything significant, but just to pay attention that if you have a third party, just because of the person which are engaged in the project, maybe it is easier to have the secondment costs, not to have a third party as how to say in whole. But I think that the third party as a definition in this Horizon Europe program, it means that you can use not only person from there, but equipment or all other infrastructure, whatever you need from third party if you want to have it in the project.
Yeah.
But of course you can use just the people from third party, and that it's look like secondment. Pay attention.
Yeah. So just following up on that, if we're talking about contributions from third parties that you pay for, personnel, that would be seconded persons. If it's equipment, you're just included in the cost category for equipment, just like if it was your own, basically.
Yeah.
And the same with if there is anything else that a third party provides, put it in the same cost category as if it was not a third party, basically. Okay, so maybe we'll take a look at the next question then from Svandis Halldórsdóttir regarding internal invoice goods. How would you go about it if you have both Horizon 2020 and Horizon Europe projects, using the same facilities? Basically, I would suggest that you, if you have a cost calculation in an Excel spreadsheet for that facility, you should have two versions of that cost calculation, one with and the one without indirect costs. But you also need to look at the rules regarding documentation requirements, which may be more strict in Horizon 2020 and Horizon Europe. But in terms of the cost calculation, the one for Horizon 2020, you would have to take out indirect costs. For Horizon Europe, you should leave them in. So basically, I would say, okay, 2 calculations in one Excel file for that, or set 2 Excel files if you like. But don't just think about the rate, but also the documentation requirements. That would be my suggestion. Marija, anything you'd like to add?
Just to pay attention on the usual accounting practice in your institution. Yeah. About calculation internal invoice, because it is always will take in consideration.
Yeah, I make sure that you have a consistent practice regarding this internal invoicing that is the same for these projects as for any other projects or any other funding sources, except that you need to check that if there are things that are not eligible under Horizon Europe that you need to take out. And the same for Horizon 2020. It's almost 4 o'clock now, so maybe we should think about closing the meeting. There are still a few questions left here. There's one comment about linked third parties, which I agree on. I mean, the definition of an affiliated entity is basically, as far as I remember, the same as for linked third parties. So it is about either a link through ownership or control, like businesses that are part of the same controlling and ownership structure, or it's about a legal collaboration agreement which goes beyond a single project. Usually starts before and ends later, and or comprises more activities than just one project. Maybe we should just conclude there. We've been greedy with the time. Sorry about that. Or I have, at least.
Yeah, no problem. I don't know do you want to answer one more? Or you want to, because we have 2 more minutes.
Okay. Okay, and the next question then is about, will any of you recommend the product to not use timesheets? To me, that feels fair. I would suggest that it's you can say it's a cost-benefit analysis. What do you gain from using timesheets, and what does it cost? In my university, during Horizon 2020, we have insisted on timesheets for those projects, but they have been also used for certain other kinds of projects. But generally, academic people hate timesheets, right? And a lot of academic people, they even ask other people to record the timesheets for them. So maybe it depends on the organization, and it depends on if people are used to doing timesheets anyway, then the cost of continuing that practice is low. But if timesheets is something that people hate and they only use for a few projects, then perhaps it's more worthwhile looking for other ways of documenting work. Should we do another one? We use seconded personnel from a university, but we only pay for it in a small percentage. Can part of the in-kind contribution be reported as against payment and then the part as free of charge? I personally think that would be risky. So if you have person provided by a third party and you're paying for some of it, I would suggest that, okay, you have to consider all of it as seconded persons. Then you have to figure out what is the costs for that that you can charge and that you could report. Having the same person provided by this third party, and some of those hours being defined as seconded and some again income free of charge, that would seem a little bit risky to me.
I agree with you, and the time is up.
Yeah.
Yes, I completely agree with you with this last answer. And I'm happy to see that we have only 2 questions more without answers so far. I think that it will not be a problem.
Okay, so we don't have to feel bad about ending now?
No, I don't feel it.
No, I think you can feel really good. You answered 16 questions and we have a lot of nice comments. So thank you so much for your very detailed and really helpful presentation that I'm sure everyone will be happy. We already got questions to see once we share the PDF as well. So really thank you so much for all your time, all the information shared. Marija as well, thank you so much for summing up our June meeting and for helping so much with all the questions. So everyone, thank you for being here. You'll receive the presentations in the next 5 minutes. I'll send it immediately. And yeah, we will upload the recording to YouTube within the next week. So if anyone wants to rewatch anything, that's also possible. And we hope to see you, of course, at more of our events. Have a wonderful rest of the day. And thank you so much for being a part of this.
Thank you all for joining us, and see you again soon.